number 10 spot, we have the Moko Mokai collection. Well, we are starting off strong with a truly scary and disturbing photo. This is a photograph of a man named Major General Horatio Gordon Robley, who had a collection of 35 heads that he stole from the native Maori people. Apparently in New Zealand, there were people called Maori that preserved the heads of fallen people. The heads were chopped off, boiled, smoked, dried in the sun, and then dipped in a shark oil before being displayed like a trophy. Whoa. They are known as the Moko Mokai. Anyways, these heads were robbed by the British when they moved into New Zealand, and this pic is one of the guys who stole them. Honestly, the man feels just as chilling to look at as the heads. Does anyone else agree? It's probably because he's holding something that looks like it could be a sharp object that might have helped in the chopping process. I don't know, could be just me.
In our number 9 spot today, we have the Stanford Prison Experiment. This photo comes from 1971 during the Stanford Prison Experiment. For those of you who aren't familiar with this experiment, it started on August 14th, 1971 and was led by university psychology professor Philip Zimbardo. The experiment took student volunteers and divided them into two groups. One group of prisoners and one group of guards, and they placed all of the volunteers into a fake prison that was created for the experiment. The experiment aimed to see if and how quickly humans would turn evil under the right conditions with the right amount of power. Basically, it was just to try and answer the question of if humans are inherently good or inherently evil. I think everyone was shocked with the results. After only 6 days, the experiment needed to be concluded because the guards began absolutely tormenting the prisoners. It really showed the kinds of things humans can be capable of even after such a short time. This photo is definitely reminiscent of that experiment and serves as our reminder. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Pioneer's Defense. This photo is known as the Pioneer's Defense, and man, does it ever look creepy. This photo comes from 1937 and was taken by a Russian photographer named Viktor Bula. This photo takes place in the Leningrad area, which is now known as St. Petersburg, which is the second largest city in Russia. The people in this photo were a part of a group that was the 1930s Russian equivalent of our Boy Scouts, which was called the Young Pioneers. The masks on their faces leave a very eerie feeling, and for a fair reason. These people were doing a military preparation drill, which is the reason for the gas masks. This photo was taken during a time when the country was under the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin, and the residents were constantly unsure of what was going to happen. The country was already seeing death, and people were already frightened just a few years before the start of World War II. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Stanley Hotel. This is a photo of the Stanley Hotel, which is the hotel that inspired the famous Stephen King novel, The Shining. This hotel was under construction in the early 1900s and saw a fateful day in 1911. There was an unexplained explosion that happened in room 217. In the explosion, a chambermaid was seriously injured, but she ended up surviving and actually returning to work. A few years later, she passed away, and ever since her passing, there have been tons of guests who swear they saw her ghost. Guests have said that they have seen her around the halls of the hotel, but the place that gets the most paranormal activity is of course room 217. This is the room where Stephen and his wife stayed for one terrifying night in 1974. Apparently they were actually the only guests in the hotel for this night, which at any other hotel might be cool, but I feel like this is not what you want from a haunted hotel. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Rothschild Surrealist Ball. The Rothschild family is one of the wealthiest and most powerful families there has ever been. For years and years, there have been many rumors swirling about just how powerful and influential they really are, and there are some pretty crazy theories out there. In 1972, the family held a surrealist ball, which is where this photo is from. These photos could be potentially very innocent, but there is just something about these elaborate masks, coupled with the theories about what this family is really up to, that just make it feel very eerie. This party is one of the most legendary there has ever been, and whether or not they really are involved in shady dealings, that still is impressive. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Salem UFO. On the morning of July 16th, 1952, this photo was captured by Shell Alpert and has stumped people ever since. This photo shows 4 unidentified objects hovering in the air above Salem, Massachusetts, and was taken at the Salem Coast Guard Air Station. The objects seem to be above the Winter Island and Cat Cove areas, but there really isn't much more that is known about this strange incident. There were a few theories regarding this photo. One is a camera glitch, others think it may have just been light reflecting off of the window that the photo was taken through. But of course there are people who point to similar incidents that happened in the 1950s and of course believe it is proof of extraterrestrial beings. It is very likely we may never know exactly, but the air of mystery it leaves is definitely kind of cool. In our number 4 spot today we have the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is a stratovolcano located in Skamania County, Washington. The volcano is best known for its huge and disastrous eruption on May 18th, 1980. This photograph comes from photographer Robert Landsberg, who was of course in the area at the time of this eruption. Before the eruption, he had visited the area in order to photograph and document all of the changes that were happening. On May 18th, he was within a few miles of the volcano when it erupted. Since he unfortunately was located so close to the explosion, he knew that he would be unable to escape this disaster, so instead of focusing on the impossible, he focused on taking as many pictures as possible. Robert was obviously incredibly brave and dedicated, but also very smart. After snapping as many photos as he could, including this one, he then secured his camera in his backpack and covered his backpack with his body. He knew he was unlikely to survive, but wanted to make sure that these photos did. His body was found 17 days later with his backpack still underneath him. His film was of course developed and has provided geologists with some really valuable insights with his close documentation of the eruption. In our number 3 spot today we have this burst of joy. You might be looking at this photo wondering how this extremely joyous photo could hold any dark secrets. Well, this photo won a Pulitzer Prize, and for a good reason. This photo was captured by Slava Vetter on March 17, 1973 at the Travis Air Force Base in California. The photo shows United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Robert L. Sturm and his family. This was taken as he was being reunited with his family after 5 years of being held as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. On October 27, 1967, he was leading a flight of F-105 when he was shot down over Hanoi and held captive until March 14, 1973. I can't imagine what this must have been like for his family, because there was a chance that he could have not come home at all. The girl with her arms wide is his 15-year-old daughter, but the look on all of their faces truly captures the pure joy that they are all feeling. In our number 2 spot today we have the frozen man of Mount Everest. This photo comes from 1996 and it shows Beck Weathers getting treated after the Mount Everest disaster. The Mount Everest disaster took place on May 10th and 11th in 1996, where there was a blizzard on the mountain that ended up stranding and taking the lives of 8 people who were aiming to descend the mountain. Beck was a part of the team who was climbing the mountain on this fateful day, and he ended up suffering from snow blindness during the climb. He actually fell into a hypothermic coma because it was so cold, and he suffered severe frostbite on his face, hands, and feet. Pretty miraculously, he not only survived, but ended up walking back down to camp in order to get help, where he was then taken by helicopter to receive treatment. He ended up needing his hands, part of his feet, and even his nose amputated, but he survived this whole ordeal, and that is the most important thing. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Dyatlov Pass incident. If you have never heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident, you better buckle in because it is so terrifying. This photo was taken in February of 1959 as 9 young Soviet hikers set out to trek through the Ural Mountains. They had set up camp, and sometime during the night, something happened that made them cut their way out of the tent and all flee the site. Leaving in such a rush, they were of course underdressed for the bitterly cold weather, and 6 of them ended up passing away from hypothermia, which is extremely tragic. The other 3, however, is where this story takes a frightening turn. Like I mentioned before, No one knows why they fled the tent in the first place, and the last 3 hikers were found passed away with severe signs of physical trauma that no one could agree on what had caused it. In 2019, the investigation was reopened, and just last year there was a conclusion that a kind of avalanche called a slab avalanche was the cause of these injuries. Regardless of what happened, this whole incident was of course very tragic, but the mystery behind it definitely takes it to a spooky place.
In our number 10 spot, we have The Last Supper. Okay, so this one I think a lot of you might have expected to be on my list, as it is known from the book The Da Vinci Code by author Dan Brown, and he pointed out an incredible secret that to this day people are still pondering about. Is Mary Magdalene sitting beside Jesus in the Last Supper painting, or is that John the Apostle? And if it is not John the Apostle, then why was he painted so feminine, whereas everyone else is clearly a man in that painting? Some say Da Vinci painted him feminine because other painters before him did. This will continue to be of much speculation, but another secret that has actually been found within this painting was found by Italian computer technician Giovanni Maria Palla, and he claims that inside the painting there are musical notes, and if played from left to right, they create a 40-second hymn that sounds like a requiem. In our number 9 spot, we have The Woman in the Attic. Well, the story behind this picture is extremely chilling, so chilling that I definitely threw on some show tunes and sang for a moment after reading about it. In case you're curious, Wicked is always my musical of choice. Speaking of Wicked, this was not planned, I swear. The woman in this photograph is a real woman who had a wicked mother who locked her in an attic for 25 years. An anonymous tip to the authorities in 1901 was how she was found, 55 pounds in a room filled with feces, old meat, and insects. Thankfully, she was okay health-wise, but mentally, as you can expect, not so much. This is a photo of her and how she was found. Truly horrible to see. While looking at this photograph and seeing her long brown hair, I'm now convinced that this is where Disney got some of their inspiration for the movie Tangled. There are way too many similarities that I'm sure they took and made 1,000 times more light and cheery. In our number 8 spot, we have For Sale. This is a photograph from 1948 that honestly at first glance I thought it to be some kind of joke. Maybe the young ones in the photograph were being bad and the mom was threatening to sell them. You know, the old tricks parents would play when children's aid wasn't a phone call away. Anyways, apparently this is a picture of something very real that was happening due to poverty at the time, and that instantly makes the picture chilling and sad. Apparently the mother and father of these young ones, Mr. and Mrs. Chalifo, needed money desperately, and so they sold them. It was said that the mother was paid to stage this photo, and perhaps that is why there is an air of phoniness to it, but no later than 2 years after, all of their young ones had been sold to families. In our number 7 spot, we have On the Brink of Death. A man by the name of Robert Overacker decided that he wanted to raise awareness for the homeless. And how was he going to do it? Oh, by doing a stunt that would attract the masses. He was going to jet ski over Niagara Falls. And this is a picture of him doing just that. This was the last picture of him taken as he fell to his death, as his parachute did not open as planned. Apparently one of the police officers at the Niagara area has said that it would have been like hitting cement as he fell 180 feet. Wow. What a haunting photo to look at. He was only 39 as well. This is why I will never skydive, because, well, there isn't a 100% survival rate, so there's that. Also, I'm a chicken, so there's also that. In our number 6, we have the two-headed dog. I always feel like puking when I see this photo. It is just the most inhumane thing ever, and it makes my heart hurt to look at. This is a photo that was taken in the 50s of the Soviet scientist Vladimir Demikhov and his science experiment, the two-headed dog. He beheaded the head off of one of the dogs and attached it to the other dog. He sewed their circulatory systems together and connected their vertebrae with plastic strings, and after the surgery was completed, both of the heads could hear, see, smell, and act as a normal dog would. The dog survived only 4 days before passing away. This scientist's research led to the creation of transplants, but wow, was this a horrible thing to have done. Also, he apparently only did this experiment due to boredom, so perhaps my anger stems from having learned that. In our number 5 spot, we have Mary Reeser. This is a picture of a blown up Mary Reeser. This picture showcased quite the story from its time. On July the 2nd of 1951 in St. Petersburg, Florida, a woman by the name of Mary Reeser somehow caught fire, and all that remained was a part of her skull and her left leg surrounded by her ashes. She was discovered by her landlady, and after the investigation, the police were unable to say as to how she could have possibly caught fire. It was this story where the idea of spontaneous human combustion was theorized, but scientists today say that they are almost certain that this could not be the case. But what is weird is that most of her house was largely devoid of fire damage, so it makes no sense. I suppose we shall never know, and this picture will continue to scare us till the end of time. In our number 4 spot, we have the truck stop killer. In the 70s, there was a killer by the name of Robert Ben Rhodes who would pick up while he was driving his commercial truck across America, and then he would kill them. He was suspected to have taken the life of over 50 women. Anyways, when he was finally caught, a picture of a named Regina K. Walters was found along with many other photos of women inside Robert's home. This photo is believed to be taken right before he killed Regina. Man, oh man, how horrible. This is quite chilling to look at. Sometimes I'm so surprised when evidence like this is leaked to the public. This must have been haunting for her family and friends to see. In our number 3 spot, we have the Radium Girls. This is another chilling photo of a girl that was a part of the Radium Girls, which were a number of women known for working at factories in the 20s where they were exposed to so much radium that they actually would come home glowing in the dark. Unfortunately, the prolonged exposure caused them to have a series of problems, such as their jaws began to swell up and fell off, their vertebrae would collapse, and eventually they passed of cancer. So knowing that this is a pic of one of those women makes this picture so much worse than it looks. However, it does already look like a scary picture of a woman in pain. Pretty scary to think about the amount of people working in factories today or working with technology that might bring about future death that we haven't been able to predict yet. In our number 2 spot, we have Anneliese Michel. Yeah, this picture will definitely give you the heebie-jeebies even without knowing the backstory. But what if I told you that this is a pic of a woman that was believed to be possessed by the devil? Yeah, this photo just got 100 times scarier, didn't it? Yeah, well, this is a photo of a young lady by the name of Anneliese, and she was a pretty devout Catholic German and grew up in the 60s. She was completely normal until she suddenly started hallucinating, eating spiders, routinely convulsing, and just drinking her own urine. She claimed that the devil was possessing her, and she would later go on to have 67 exorcisms. Nothing worked, and she ended up passing away from malnutrition at the age of 23. Her tale is what inspired the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Yep, deeply chilling. In our number 1 spot, we have the Pioneer's Defense. Save the best for last. This is probably one of the creepiest photos that I have ever seen. This is a historical image taken by the Russian photographer Viktor Bula in 1937. If it isn't creepy enough without the explanation, here's the explanation. These are people that were part of a Soviet youth group called the Young Pioneers, and they are wearing gas masks because they were in the middle of a military preparation drill, as this was during a time when Joseph Stalin was the dictator and no one knew if death was around the corner.
In our number 10 spot today, we have John Lennon. Of course, we all know John Lennon as one part of the Beatles who went on after they disbanded to have a very successful solo career. Lennon was not only a musician, but also a peace activist who was strongly anti-war. He was not afraid to display his activism and held a 2-week anti-war demonstration. There was a period of 3 years where the Nixon administration was trying to have him deported for his criticism against the Vietnam War. On December 8th, 1980, Lennon was leaving the Dakota apartment complex when he was stopped by a man named Mark David Chapman. Lennon signed an autograph for Mark, which is what is happening in this photo, and then Lennon went on his way. Little did he know, Mark was going to shoot him later that night. Once Lennon returned to the apartment complex, Mark was there waiting for him to commit his crime. Mark has said he did it mostly for the attention, which is so horrifying, but Mark is also a very religious man who explained that Lennon once saying that the Beatles were more famous than Jesus is what really pushed him to commit this crime. It is very crazy that this photo was captured when Lennon was being kind to who he thought was a fan, and no one could have predicted what would happen just a few hours later.
In our number 9 spot, we have the young woman powdering herself. This is a painting done by George Seurat between 1889 to 1890. This looks like an innocent painting of a woman just, putting on her foundation for the day, maybe doing a little 1800s equivalent to contouring and finishing it off with a nice red lip. Anyways, there's a lot more going on with this painting than you may think. Recent x-rays have revealed that the flower in the top corner of the painting was actually once a self-portrait of George. Apparently he covered it up because he was told that it was bizarre. Apparently it's even more notable because the woman in this painting was his mistress. So it would make sense that she would have a portrait of him hanging in her room. Ooh, secrets and lies. I doubt the ugliness of your portrait was the only reason you covered it up, George. Probably because the missus didn't know about your mistress. Naughty. In our number 8 spot, we have Supper at Emos. This is a painting that was made by Caravaggio in 1601. This painting is depicting Jesus with, we can assume to be his disciples, and they are sitting at a table with tons of food and fruit. At first glance you might not see it, but if you look at the shadow of the fruit basket, you will see that the shadow is in the shape of a fish. People believe that this is a little purposeful Easter egg done by the painter, and that the fish is alluding to the story of Jesus feeding the masses with fish. Honestly, that makes sense, but he could have just put fish on the table. That doesn't need to be a secret in a shadow, but perhaps for fun, I guess I can see the appeal. In our number 7 spot, we have David and Goliath. This is the David and Goliath painting that is in the Sistine Chapel that shows David defeating Goliath the giant. This painting was of course painted by none other than Michelangelo in 1509. This painting is already pretty spectacular, but apparently there's also a little hidden symbol within the painting. The way that David is standing over Goliath, his stance, is perfectly in the shape of the Hebrew letter Gimel. The letter is supposed to represent reward and punishment, which of course works perfectly with what happens in this story. In our number 6 spot, we have The Topsy-Turvy World. This is an oil painting that is also known as The Blue Clock by Peter Bruegel the Elder, done in 1559. This painting is so chaotic. It's hard to know what to focus on because there's so much happening, and apparently it's on purpose. Within this painting are 112 proverbs acted out, which are basically small statements that express truth about human behavior based on common sense or experience. 2 that I could make out and thought were easy to see were swimming against the tide or banging one's head against a brick wall. 110 more to go. Could be here all night. Let me know if you see any in the comment section below. In our number 5 spot, we have Patch of Grass by Van Gogh. The 1887 painting Patch of Grass is one of many paintings, apparently, by Van Gogh, where another work of art has been found hidden behind the painting. In 2008, 2 scientists by the name of Joris Dick and Quan Janssens discovered an X-ray technique that helped them reveal a portrait of a peasant woman buried under the blades of the grass. The woman looks quite sad, so maybe that's why he decided to cover her up. Although apparently Van Gogh was known for reusing his paper due to not having a lot of supplies and money, so they have found a lot of paintings within his paintings over the years. pretty awesome. In our number 4 spot, we have The Old Guitarist. This is a classic Pablo Picasso painting done in the early 1900s. It is known for its haunting vibe due to the way that the old man is hunched over playing his guitar just like this. Just lovely. He also is quite white and ghostly. In 1998, an infrared camera revealed that there is actually another painting layered underneath this painting that features a woman. Apparently, as this painting begins to fade, it has become easier to see the woman's face above the guitar player's neck. Honestly, the woman looks a lot more pleasant than this man. Perhaps that is why he is so ghostly and sad, because he is thinking of her. Perhaps she was always intended to be there. She is a ghost that is within him in the afterlife. Okay, who knows, but that would be pretty cool if true. In our number 3 spot, we have the creation of Adam. This one is more cool than bizarre, I think, but you can decide. This is the beautiful creation of Adam painting done by none other than Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. This is yet another painting where he had a hidden illustration within the painting, and personally, I think it is so cool. In this painting, you see God reaching for Adam to give him life. We all know the story. But if you look at God and what is surrounding him, you'll actually see that it's an anatomical illustration of a human brain, which could show that Michelangelo intended to show that God gave Adam life, but also human knowledge. Whoa, mind blown, it makes sense. In our number 2 spot, we have Madonna with Saint Giovannino. This is a painting made by Domenico Ghirlandaio around 1448-1494. This is a painting that has not actually become quite popular over the years because of its intended purpose. It's become popular because of the flying object that appears to be in the top right of the painting behind Madonna. Some believe it to be the first depiction of a UFO, which could indicate a sighting had occurred in the 15th century and quite possibly by the artist. Also, there weren't planes in this time, and this is certainly not a bird in the sky, as there is no clear indication of wings. So does that mean that it was meant to depict something that wasn't of its time, like a UFO? I think yes. Let us know in the comment section below. In our number 1 spot, we have Head of a Peasant Woman by Van Gogh. I had to put this painting in our number 1 spot as this was only just discovered, and the world is so very excited to have discovered yet another Van Gogh masterpiece. If you don't know Van Gogh, well, he is one of the most popular artists of the 20th century, so just take a moment and do some Googling. Anyways, a hidden prize was recently discovered behind his piece, The Head of a Peasant Woman, by the conservators at the National Gallery of Scotland. After x-raying the piece and not expecting much, they discovered that beyond the cardboard was not the peasant woman, but actually a self-portrait of Van Gogh. He was known to have done self-portraits, but to discover this, it must have been magical. The portrait is behind many layers of glue and cardboard, and suspected to have been done this way to help protect the artwork for an upcoming exhibition in the early 20th century. How fascinating.